It is game day on Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell here for the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast. And Wes, we got South Carolina, Missouri today, noon kickoff on the SEC network at Williams-Brice. And I think it's been a tough week for South Carolina coming off that loss to Kentucky. And, you know, the challenge this week has been to turn the attention to Missouri, and the Gamecocks are dealing with injuries this week as well. Wes?
Yeah, they are. You know, I think it's been a tough week for the fan base as well. And obviously there's been a lot of guys banged up, some that will play against Missouri and some that will not. And I guess most eyes have been on Jake Bentley all week. And, from what I've been told, South Carolina will obviously take another final look at Jake Bentley on Saturday to see if he can play before the game. But right now, according to multiple reports, and we've talked to folks as well, it seems more and more like the expectation is that Michael Scarnecchia will end up starting this football game, at least as we're recording on Friday. That seems to be how this thing is trending. So, we'll certainly still be tracking that leading all the way up to the game. Nothing is official yet, so I want to make that clear. But, as the week has gone on, Bentley's dealt with some pain, I think. Scarnecchia has taken a lot of the first-team reps in preparation for possibly starting. Bentley did do a little bit more on Thursday, I was told, than he did the rest of the week, so there was a little bit of positive movement there. But right now, just as far as preparation for this game and sort of getting ready, it's been Scarnecchia that has taken the majority of those first-team reps that are your more game plan-based reps that you take throughout the week.
Right. Wes, news broke on Friday that Scarnecchia might get his first start as a Gamecock, and I fully anticipated Bentley would be ready to go. And, obviously I don't have inside information. I have no knowledge of the situation, but it felt to me like, Bentley was going to be ready. But now it looks like Scarnecchia may get his first start.
Yeah, looking that way. And, I think that, and the first thing fans are going to ask is, can South Carolina win this game with Michael Scarnecchia at quarterback? What does Michael Scarnecchia bring to the table? He's a pass-first quarterback. He does throw a beautiful ball. I mean, he throws a catchable football, nice spiral. It's kind of interesting to me that he's the last, Steve Spurrier recruited quarterback on this roster. And when I watch Michael Scarnecchia drop back, just his fundamentals, his technique, his footwork, he looks like a Steve Spurrier-trained quarterback with the, Spurrier's quarterbacks always sort of had the football high and tight up behind their ear hole almost in their helmets. To me, that was a signature of a Steve Spurrier coach quarterback. And, I look at Scarnecchia, even though Spurrier's been gone, obviously, a number of years now, he just sort of looks like a Spurrier guy. He gets the football out quickly. Sometimes that means just, dumping the football off underneath the zone as opposed to putting it in danger and throwing down the seams or, trying to find some areas in the zone deeper. But yeah, he's a kid that's worked really, really hard to get to this position. He's taken his job as the backup very, very seriously. He does have the respect of his teammates, who I'm sure are excited that he's going to get his chance. But it's obviously a lot to put on a guy who's never made a start as well. When you look across the way and you see a Missouri offense that has the ability to put up points in bunches.
So Scarnecchia got some action in the Coastal Carolina game earlier this year, and he's had, spot duty here and there over the years, but not much. And Muschamp talked about him during his midweek press conference this week, Wes, and, he said good things about Scarnecchia. Scarnecchia's been around a program a long time. He is very comfortable at South Carolina, and he's familiar with the offense now, so he knows what he's supposed to do, but he just hasn't seen a lot of live bullets.
Yeah, he hasn't. And, it's difficult in this league because teams are going to give you different looks, and teams are going to give you, especially if they know that a guy hasn't seen a lot of true playing time. The game moves faster, I'm sure, when you're out there for the first time. And, Missouri's been a defense that actually has struggled a little bit. I think they're second to last in the conference in total defense as far as, yardage per game allowed. So, they're probably going to look back and say, hey, we can throw the kitchen sink at this guy and see if we can confuse him because, if all it takes is 2 or 3 mistakes and it can change a game. So I think that's a concern for South Carolina. But the positive side of it, man, is that this is a Missouri defense that has been very susceptible to the pass. And, I was thinking about it that, okay, the sort of common thought is going to be, well, you simplify, you run the football, you establish the run, and you take as much of the game off of Skarnecki as possible. But I'm looking, man, Missouri's way better against the run than they are against the pass. The play may actually be to just come out and try to find Skarnecki some nice, easy throws early on and let him build that confidence, and then maybe try to come back to the running game. Because a lot of times I notice when teams try to take too much off of a quarterback, then the other team knows they're going to run the football.
Yep.
The other team maybe is better at stopping the run, and then you put your quarterback in 3rd and 7, and it's a way worse situation than if you were just aggressive and let them throw on 1st and 10. So I thought Clemson with Chase Brice getting thrown into that spot last week, they were a little bit too conservative, I think, with him early on for that very reason. So I think for South Carolina, maybe you go opposite and just come out and throw it around a little bit.
So a lot of uncertainty for the Gamecocks with the quarterback situation this week. Noon kickoff today for South Carolina, Missouri on the SEC Network. And we're going to hear later today from Colin Taylor, our staff writer. We'll also hear from Gabe DeArmond, who is the publisher of PowerMizzou.com. He'll give us a look at the Missouri side of things heading into today's game. And, Wes, I got to ask you, if Skarnecki ends up getting the start, what are the chances that we see Dak Joyner today?
I think that the chances are pretty good. I do my little Carolina Confidential every week that I put out my final thoughts and predictions on the game. And, I'm predicting that we see Dakereon Joyner for the first time this week. It makes sense. Not that I'm saying he's ready to go out there and take over the offense or anything like that, but I think considering what South Carolina's up against, considering that they are going to have to get creative in some ways, I think it's time to just see what he can do, even if it's a small package here or there to sort of change up the pace of the game, or to possibly use in short yardage or goal line when you're dealing with more guys around the line of scrimmage, and a running quarterback can be helpful. Just to sort of implement that quarterback run game aspect. And you have to let him throw a little bit too, just to keep the opponent from dialing in on that. But, if you're going to see Joyner this year, and obviously he's got 4 games to play with and still redshirt, and they haven't burned any of those yet. They haven't played him at all. So, down the stretch of this season, if you want, you can sort of manage his time and get him in there for a number of plays. And I think considering everything going on with the quarterback position right now at South Carolina, it makes a lot of sense for this to be the day that we get to see what Dakereon Joyner can do.
Yes, it does. And, Wes, I got to tell you, I would like to see Joyner. I'm sure a lot of fans feel the same way, particularly if Skarnecki gets to start. I think best case scenario is that Bentley is healthy and he plays the whole game. But if the Gamecocks are forced to go with Skarnecki as the starter, I'd like to see a couple packages with Dakereon Joyner, because it'll be a glimpse of the future.
Yeah, it could be. And I think, anytime you're putting together your offense, you want for there to be as many opportunities to sort of take the defense out of their comfort zone as possible. And it's one more person or one more aspect or attack for them to have to look out for and have to adjust to. So, if you're South Carolina, you're looking for as many of those opportunities. You can't just be conservative just because you got a different quarterback in there. You got to find ways to be creative, and Joyner gives you a little bit different skill set at the position. So yeah, I think it just makes too much sense for this not to be the week you do it.
Joyner's an athlete, and he would bring a whole other dimension to the Gamecock offense. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes down today with the Gamecocks and the quarterback position. Wes, quarterback not the only position where the Gamecocks are banged up this week.
Yeah, they're banged up at a number of positions. JT Ebay, the safety, is a graduate transfer in from Rice that has started the first 4 games. He's out until the bye week. They announced on Thursday that Eldridge Thompson, the linebacker, reserve linebacker, is out for the season due to a shoulder issue. Brian Edwards has been banged up. Now, from what I've heard on Brian Edwards, it's sort of the opposite of Jake Bentley, that I'm sure they'll test him before the game as well. But everything I've heard on Brian Edwards points to him playing on Saturday, which is obviously, if you're South Carolina, you need all your weapons out there, as many weapons out there as possible. Looks like Jamias Williams, who's been banged up, should be good to go. So, yeah, this team very quickly, though, has gotten banged up at a number of positions.
So, Wes, with eBay out today, we're looking at, 3 possible replacements at safety, or it may be, safety by committee with eBay out.
Yeah, and I think as long as Jemias Williams is able to go, then he's probably your starter in eBay's spot. Though Nick Harvey, he's still in the mix there as well. I think those would be the two guys I would look to play the most alongside Stephen Montag. I have heard Jalen Dickerson has shown some flashes lately. He was a kid that we talked about a lot early on as being someone that this staff is very, very high on. He has, he's made improvements I've heard in practice, so he may be a guy to watch. But as long as Jemias is healthy and Nick Harvey's in the mix, I would expect those two guys to play a bunch.
All right, Muschamp mentioned Javon Charleston as a possible player at safety with eBay injured this week. So injury's been a real story this week, Wes. In fact, Muschamp mentioned 8 different players on the injury report during Tuesday's midweek press conference. So South Carolina, largely has been very healthy all year until this week.
Yes, they have. And then, I guess something that's been completely overshadowed is that Chad Terrell might make his sort of re-debut, I guess you will. He's returning from an ACL injury this spring that he's fully recovered from, returned to practice this week, and he may, Muschamp said he will play, so he may be out there for the first time on Saturday, which obviously they can use all the depth they can get at any of their positions.
Pivotal ball game today between South Carolina and Missouri, and this is the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell here. We're going to hear from Colin Taylor and Gabe DeArmond later in the podcast. Wes, the Gamecocks come in 2-2 overall and 1-2 in the Southeastern Conference. Missouri's coming off a bye week. They're 3-1. They're 0-1 in the league. They lost to Georgia 2 weeks ago, 43-29. That was played in Missouri. And I talked with Gabe DeArmond earlier this week on Gamecock Central Radio about the fact that Missouri played Georgia a much more competitive ball game than South Carolina did. That's just a fact.
Yeah, they did, and I think this is a pretty good Missouri team coming in. They're going to have their quarterback available. We don't know that South Carolina will, and Drew Lock. I mean, this guy is good, man. He spreads the football around all over the place. They have a little bit more of a running game this year, which makes them even more dangerous. I think, honestly, that this is a game where South Carolina is going to have to be able to get back to what it was able to do the last 2 years, and that's create turnovers. They had a bunch of ball games. You can go back where the offenses were fairly similar, total offense as far as South Carolina and their opponent. The numbers in between the 20s a lot of times look very, very similar, but then South Carolina was able to play great red zone defense. They were able to create turnovers, and that's been the difference in a lot of ball games. So I think for South Carolina to win this game at home, big SEC game for them, they're going to have to find a way to put the football back in their offense's hands because, this Missouri offense is not one that you can keep giving the ball back to. If South Carolina has any struggles on offense and keeps putting the ball in Drew Lock's hands, you're just not going to be able to keep them down all game long. So I think creating turnovers on defense and finding a way to possess the football on offense. Not to say you have to go score every time or score 35 points, but the offense is going to have to find a way to stay on the field and just limit Missouri's possessions a little bit, which, this offseason, that really hasn't been the talk for South Carolina. It's been more about tempo, introducing that side of things. But I think today, with what they're up against and with what they're dealing with, you kind of have to go back to the idea of trying to possess the football and trying to limit the game a little bit.
Wes, the Gamecocks did a fantastic job last year of minimizing turnovers on offense, and they created a bunch on defense, and that just hasn't been the case this year on either side of the football. I believe the Gamecocks have 9 turnovers in 4 games and have only come up with 4 takeaways. How do you explain that change from last year to this year?
Well, I think some of it's kind of easy. We're still talking about a pretty small sample size when it comes to turnovers. Those things come in bunches, I think. You'll have 0 or 1 in one game, and then you'll have 4 or 5 in another when a team really gets in a position to sort of – it's almost contagious when a team's playing bad. They turn the ball over multiple times. And also, I think you look at the flow of those games. The 2 best teams South Carolina has played they've played with a lead. So if you're Georgia or if you're Kentucky, what reason do you have to put the ball in danger? You have no reason to take risks. I think it's easy to look at those numbers and say, defense just isn't getting the ball out. But if you're playing from behind, then you're having to try to fit the football in tighter spots. You're having to try to throw the football more. You're having to take a few more chances. If you're the Georgia Bulldogs and you have the biggest offensive line I've ever seen in my life, and you have outstanding running backs, and you have a quarterback who's very accurate with the short passing game on the outside, the ball is just frankly not going to be in danger if you have a lead. Kentucky, they're up 24-3 at halftime. They're not going to put the ball in danger in the second half. There's no need to. They had one interception, but so I think a lot of that is just when you put yourself behind in a ball game, the opponent just is not in as many spots to turn the football over because they're going to be inherently more conservative. So South Carolina, I think, especially early on in ball games when the game is still in the balance, I guess you would say, it's been South Carolina that's had the big turnovers. The pick six against Georgia, the fumble backed up on their own goal line against Kentucky. Those are the plays we've seen South Carolina be on the other end of in the past. So I think a big turnover from the defense. The defense turned over Drew Lock a number of times last season. And I remember some big turnovers in the game 2 years ago between these two teams in Columbia, South Carolina, that helped South Carolina win the football game. So to me, that's a big key for them. It's always a key, but especially in this game.
So Carolina's 2-2 and 1-2 in the league. Missouri 3-1 and 0-1, but Missouri coming off a bye week. And their wins this year have come against Tennessee Martin, Wyoming, and at Purdue. And I thought that Purdue game was interesting, Wes, because Missouri, they won the game 40-37, but Purdue threw for 572 yards in that ball game and lost. They lost the game despite the fact they threw for almost 600 yards. So, going into the week this week, Wes, I really thought that this might be a chance for the Gamecock offense to find some sync again and to have a productive day, particularly if Bentley were healthy. So the Jake Bentley injury has kind of thrown a monkey wrench in all those plans.
Yeah, and, this is a Purdue team that obviously can throw the football around, but Purdue, I don't think Purdue has a win this year either, do they? So
yeah, they beat Boston College the week after they lost to Missouri.
Okay, but they started 0-3.
They were 0-3, and then they beat BC, which had moved into the top 25 at that time. That's right. That was several weeks ago.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So, you look and, like I said earlier, there's probably some room to exploit this Missouri defense in the passing game, and their numbers have obviously, when you give up that many yards in the passing game, it skews your numbers really for the entire rest of the season sometimes. But, you look at, I pulled it up now, man, 614 total yards of offense for Purdue in that game. You're not a good defense, obviously, when you give up that number of yards. So it could really be an opportunity. I know more so an opportunity if Bentley had been in there, but that, if this thing happens the way we think it will. But there's a lot worse situations, I think, for Scarnecchia to step into than against this defense and then being at home. So there will be plays to be made. I just think, and these wide receivers have to bounce back as well. They all know they didn't have their best game last week against Kentucky. They got to bounce back and go help their backup quarterback and step up and make some big plays on those 50-50 balls.
A pivotal game for both teams today, Wes. Missouri's October schedule is really tough. They go to Alabama next week. Then they've got a non-conference game, and then they host Kentucky. So they're looking at back-to-back road games starting today against the Gamecocks, and then they've got Kentucky at home later in the month, and this might be the best Kentucky team in 40 years. And, from the Gamecock perspective, Carolina's still got Texas A&M coming up. They got Florida coming up. They got Clemson coming up. It's a pivotal game today, Wes. Got to have it.
Yeah, it is huge. I mean, you start looking through and trying to pick out wins, and South Carolina, they found 9 wins on their schedule last year, and They lost to Georgia last year. Obviously, they lost to Georgia this year. They lost to Kentucky last year. They lost to Kentucky this year. So they're still, they started slow last year too, and they're still on a similar track if they can find a way to correct some of the mistakes they've made. But obviously, in that 9-win season last year, one of those wins was a win over Missouri. So they, to me, to have any chance of being the team that we thought they could be preseason and start hitting those win totals, they really, really need a win against Missouri because, like you said, you got South Carolina's got Texas A&M coming up. They're a really talented football team that'll be coming. At least for them, that game is in Columbia. But still, if you lose this one, what's the psyche of the team at that point? How's the program feel at that point? You're really in a danger zone at that point of possibly even talking about bowl eligibility, not being in play. So I think you look at last year, this time last year, South Carolina had lost to both those two teams they lost to this year. They should have lost to Louisiana Tech, and they found a way to win at the end, and they blew a late lead against Texas A&M. So nobody thought they were going to go win 9 games at this point in the season last year. They fixed some things. They turned some things around. So it can be done. I think a lot of people are sort of almost writing this year off because of what's happened, but it can be done, but it needs to really start at Williams-Brice Stadium this weekend.
Real interesting what's going to happen today with the Gamecock quarterback situation. If Bentley does not play and Scarnecchia gets his first start, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the Gamecock offense looks like. Scarnecchia, 6'3", 216 pounds, signed with Steve Spurrier's coaching staff back in 2014, like Wes told you. He redshirted twice, Wes, in 14 and again in 16. Outstanding student athlete in 2017 and in 2018. He earned the offense's GPA award, so he's a fantastic student, but he just hasn't seen a lot of action. He's only thrown 13 passes in his career, and 12 of those came this year. He's 8 of 13 passing in his career, 7 of 12 this season, and he was 4 of 6 for 45 yards after replacing Jake Bentley last week. So, an opportunity certainly for Scarnecchia if he ends up being the starter, a chance to come in and say, hey, I've been in this program a long time. I can come in and fill in for Jake Bentley on a week that he might be banged up and help South Carolina to a win. So a real opportunity for him, Wes. He's got to be excited.
Yeah, no doubt. You're the backup quarterback. A lot of times you work really, really hard, maybe as hard as everybody else on the team, and you never really get to go out and show what you're made of. And, like you said, he's a senior. He's a smart kid. I think it's just about playing within himself, not trying to do too much. And that's why I think the rest of the team sort of has to rally around him and make some plays for him. Because if South Carolina gets behind again and he has to go out there and just play a bunch and find a way to make big plays, then, clearly it's going to be tough to win. But if South Carolina can play from a position of power and not from behind, then they have so much more at their disposal on what they can do offensively. They can still limit what they ask him to do. They can keep him comfortable, and then maybe they can sort of wear Missouri down with the running game and sort of soft the game away that way. So I think, again, I mentioned it, Kentucky, it went way against South Carolina, but game flow. That's something that I don't think gets talked about enough in college football. How the game starts out, who makes a big play early, who sort of takes early control. It has such an effect on how the rest of the game has to be called, how you make your decisions the rest of the way. So South Carolina needs to, I think, play from a lead in this football game. And if they do that, then all of a sudden I think they got a pretty good chance to win. But if they're having to fight and claw from behind like they did at Kentucky, like they did against Georgia, then it's just going to be very, very difficult.
So Bentley appeared in the media room after the Kentucky game Saturday night. He did have a slight limp, but he said that he thought the knee would be fine. Scarnecchia took a lot of first-team reps in practice this week, and Dakarian Joyner also got some first-team reps in practice. So a lot of uncertainty, again, surrounding the Gamecock quarterback situation, and I don't think we know what to expect at this point, Wes. We're going to head into Williams-Brice and find out.
Yeah, let's go see. It should be it's never easy in the SEC anyway. It should be an interesting day. If anything, South Carolina fans should get a look. And some of these fans, let's call it like it is. Some of these fans on social media, in my opinion, have been very, very harsh on Jake Bentley, and a little bit too harsh on Jake Bentley. You know, I think Jake would be the first one to tell you he didn't play to his ability against Kentucky. It was not a good game for him, but fans also need to remember that you know they've seen way worse quarterback play at times than what Jake Bentley has shown. You know, this guy's been a huge part of them getting to the point they were at last year with 9 wins and the Outback Bowl win. He's been a huge part of the progress in the program, and just bench the quarterback is not necessarily the way to go. And I think fans have been, to me, even a little bit too personal in some of the stuff you see on social media. Not all of them, obviously. It's just a handful. But I think, the point I'm getting at is that those who wanted to see a change, they may get their wish today for other reasons. And we're going to see, what happens when that does happen.
Bentley has started 24 consecutive games for the Gamecocks. He's thrown for over 5,000 yards in his career this season, 63% completion ratio, 928 yards, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and he's 11th in the SEC in passer rating. So if Bentley does not start today, we're moving into uncharted territory for Gamecock football. So it's going to be interesting to see, Wes, where the Gamecocks go from here, how they handle this situation today, because this is a critical ball game. Tough games left on the schedule, and the Gamecocks need a win.
Yeah, they do, and we'll see if they can get that. It's all about, again, execution, not shooting yourselves in the foot. I think we've talked about that enough probably all week long, is that so many self-inflicted wounds for South Carolina at Kentucky. You just aren't going to win games when you put yourself in bad situations, whether it's sacks or turnovers or penalties, 11 penalties last week. All those drop passes, all those things contribute to that loss. And they got to cut down on all those things this week, and missed tackles, bad angles, stuff like that on defense. All very just back to basics type stuff, which I'm sure is in some ways, I don't know if encouraging is the word, but in some ways it's fixable. But also, I bet, on the other hand, very, very frustrating for the coaching staff.
All right, Wes, talk a little bit more about the Missouri offense. Before we get to keys to victory today, let's talk about Drew Lock a little bit more. This guy's 9th in the nation in passing. He's averaging over 320 yards a game. But like we talked about with Gabe DeArmond earlier this week on GCR, Locke, the last 2 years, has not had his best games against South Carolina.
No, he really hasn't, and they've turned him over a couple times, and they've in many ways sort of had the secret sauce to beating this team. I think you've seen Missouri put up huge numbers. Just video game numbers against bad defenses, and South Carolina, has forced Missouri to go the length of the field on them, I think, as far as sort of taking away some of those deep explosive plays they get, limiting their explosive plays. And, I think that doesn't make for a fun game for fans necessarily, but because they get tired of seeing a team just dink and dunk you down the field. But what that does, I think if you compare that with a offense that is playing a ball control, time of possession game, and you're making Missouri's offense, go on these 7, 8, 9, 10 play drives and dink and dunk down the field, then the clock is constantly running. So you limit their possessions. You're playing sort of umbrella coverage, you would say, where you're taking away the deep ball, playing a little bit more zone than maybe South Carolina wants to in the past. And you're just forcing this team to use a lot of their plays to get down the field, as opposed to making these big plays that they make against some of these overmatched defenses that they face. So that shortens the game. That creates sometimes more chances for turnovers. And I think that's been the recipe, if you will, for South Carolina the last couple of years. And we'll see if they can do it again this year, because Locke still throws the deep ball. He still stretches the defense vertically, but they also run the football a little bit more and a little bit better than they have in the past. So that, to me, has been something that has been very detrimental to this offense, is when they're in short yardage or when they're in goal line or even in late game situations trying to run out the clock. If you're not a great running football team, that can catch up to you. And I think Missouri, it's interesting. Missouri will probably finish the year without the raw numbers that they had the last couple of years, but they may be a better offense, if that makes any sense, because a lot of times their big offensive stats were when they were just putting up ridiculous numbers against defenses that were just completely outmatched.
Yeah, Missouri brought in a new offensive coordinator this year, Derek Dooley, and he has slowed the tempo of their offense, and that's really helped the Tigers because it's enabled them to sustain some more drives, and they've kept their defense off the field a lot more. In fact, their time of possession is way up this year, and that's been a marked change for Missouri football. So we're just about ready to get it started here. Let's check on keys to victory today for the Gamecocks, and we'll send it over to Colin Taylor, staff writer with Gamecock Central.
So obviously, South Carolina defensively needs to be able to stop Drew Lock. They're going to have to get set, and, it comes down to explosive plays. If they can get, if they can limit Missouri's downfield passing attack, then I think that becomes a one-dimensional game for the Tigers, and I don't think they're necessarily built to win games like that. I think they want to win on the arm of Drew Lock. And if they can stop that passing attack, which South Carolina ranks in the top 30 of pass defense through 4 games this year. If they can stop that, then things will go well. And offensively, I think it's going to come down to quarterback play. If you can keep up with Missouri and, you can move the ball consistently down the field and keep that offense off the field, then you should be able to win this game. But I think it's going to be close. I think both teams are pretty evenly matched. And we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how well Jake Bentley plays, if he plays after that Kentucky game. And I think he's going to come out and want to prove people wrong and prove that that was a one-off instead of his consistent play. So it'll be close, and I think that it's going to come down to how well the quarterbacks play against each other.
That's Colin Taylor, staff writer with Gamecock Central with Gamecock Keys. And now for Missouri's Keys to Victory, we'll send it over to Gabe DeArmond, the publisher of PowerMizzou.com, our Rivals Network partner.
The keys for Missouri in this game, it sounds really elementary and basic, but number one, they just can't make mistakes. That's not too many of them. That's what beat them against Georgia. They were competitive in the game against Georgia, but they had 3 turnovers. They had a blocked punt, a few penalties mixed in at the wrong time. If Missouri plays a clean game, I think Missouri's capable of being competitive with just about anybody in this league except for maybe Alabama. But if they go out there and make a bunch of mistakes, obviously they're going to be in some trouble. Now, that seems pretty simple going into games. You can't make a bunch of mistakes, but for this team, it seems especially true. And then second, I think they've got to find a way to make Jake Bentley or whoever is playing quarterback for South Carolina uncomfortable. They haven't done that. They don't necessarily have to have 5 sacks or pick him off 3 times, but they just can't let him sit in the pocket and pick him apart, because with guys like Brian Edwards and Deebo Samuel outside, like, this sets up as a game where I think Jake Bentley's capable of having 400 yards passing if he's on his game and Missouri's giving him time to throw. If they can get back there, especially if South Carolina wants to throw the ball on first down and disrupt them a little bit, put South Carolina in second and long situations, the run defense has been pretty good and I think can hold up and give Missouri a pretty good chance. But they've given up big plays. They've given up a high completion percentage in the passing game, and so they've got to find a way to get back there and at least make Bentley move around a little bit and get off rhythm.
Thank you, Gabe. That's Gabe DeArmond, publisher of PowerMizzou.com, our Rivals Network partner, giving us Missouri's keys to victory. Wes, really a key ball game for both teams today. You feel like the season could pivot depending on how the game goes for both teams. A Carolina win could get their season back on track. Missouri looking at a tough schedule in October, so they need this win today just as much.
No doubt, and the South Carolina fan base needs this win. I think everybody's had a tough week after the way things played out in Kentucky, and we'll see if this team can go execute and find a way to get back on the winning track.
All right, good stuff. Thank you very much, Wes.
Yes, sir. Let's do it again next week.
Yes, sir. Game Day podcast coming up next week. And for Wes Mitchell, I'm Emerson Phillips. We want to thank Colin Taylor and Gabe DeArmond. And thank you for joining us for the Gamecock Central Game Day podcast. Enjoy the ball game, everybody.